Alright guys, so what we're going to be doing with this video is I'm going to teach you how to tie several different knots. And once we learn the basics of tying knots, what I'll then do in a separate video is show you some practical uses of these knots. So we're going to focus on the knots that I put in your list as far as the things that you need to know how to tie for the test. And then remember that you have a ninth knot that you will need to pick on your own. So you'll look through that list of knots that I gave you online and you'll pick one from anything in that group, okay? So surprise me. I wouldn't make it too complicated because it needs to be something that you can pretty easily tie, but pick something that just for whatever reason appeals to you. Remember, you got 8 knots that you have to know, and then a ninth one that is all on your own. So we're going to try to make this as fun as possible, but I'm getting ready to show you some of the different knots that and the ways to tie those different knots. All right, so the first knot we're going to learn how to tie is an overhand knot. Now this should be the easiest knot you'll learn to tie all day long. Okay, so with our knots, we have what's called a running end and a standing end. The standing end is the long part, okay, the part that would connect to something. Okay, your running end is the end that you generally tie the knot with and what you tie to the standing end. So to tie an overhand knot, okay, we're looking at taking your running end, okay, and passing it over the standing end, okay, and so going over the rope and under it and back through, and then you pull it tight and you've got your typical overhand knot. Now overhand knot is a good knot to use as a stopper knot. That's most of the time what these are used for. So you would put it at the end of a line, it tightens down and it doesn't come loose, okay, once it's got pressure on it. It's not the kind of knot we would use for something important like a lifeline or anything like that, and we'll talk about some of those kind of knots a little bit later. So I'm going to demonstrate this for you again. Okay, taking our running end, passing it over the standing end, we're essentially creating a loop. Okay, so we look at that, that creates a loop. Okay, so then we just take that end, go around and back over. And so it looks like what you do is when you tie your shoe, pull it all the way tight, and now you've got your overhand knot. All right, the next knot we're going to tie is called a overhand slip knot. Okay, so if you can tie overhand, just plain overhand knot, you can tie an overhand slip knot because the principle is the same. Okay, so but instead of doing a complete overhand knot, so like that would be your overhand knot. Okay, instead what you're going to do is you're going to make a loop. Okay, so here's our loop. Let me flip this over here. Okay, so we make a loop, and if you see how the running end is crossing under the standing end, okay, we then take a bit of our standing end and pull it through the hole there, and then we can tighten that down, pulling both the standing end and the running end, and then that gives us this slip knot. Okay, and we know that we've tied it correctly when you can do this, pull it out and it automatically unfolds. Okay, so let's do it again. We're making a loop. Okay, we're taking our standing end and pushing that through so it looks like that. I'm going to tighten it down just a little bit so you can see kind of what that looks like when before the knot is cinched down. Okay, so I just took another bit of that rope and made another loop and I passed it through. So I'm going to do it again. So just make a loop. Okay, then we make something called a bite. That's what this is, where I'm taking my rope and forming what we call a half loop, I guess, but it's called a bite. Okay, I'll take that bite, I bring it over and through the loop that I formed, put my finger in there, and cinch down. Just pull both ends, okay? And then that cinches that knot all the way down. And so then one end will slip. Okay, this allows me to use it to grip things. Okay, I can move it in and out. Okay, so that's a overhand slip knot. And you know you've tied it correctly when you can do that and it pulls completely loose. All right, this one is just for kicks and giggles. Okay, this is not a required knot for you to know, but this is one that it builds on the same principle as the overhand knot. And this is what we call a double overhand knot. And it's a little bit more, it's a little stronger knot than the typical overhand knot. So you take and make a loop, okay? Then you make another loop that goes basically following the same path, okay, as the first one. Okay, so we've got 2 loops there, okay? And then you're going to take your standing end and push through, make a bite and push through that double loop just like you did before, and then cinch it down, okay? And this gives you a different look, okay, to that. You see how you got the 2 loops there? Okay, you've got your slipping part there. Pull the standing in there if I can find it. There it is. Notice it's a little tighter. It doesn't. It's more of a snug knot, so it doesn't quite give the way the overhand knot does. Okay, so it makes it more secure. If you were using this to cinch down on something, the likelihood that it's going to slip loose or come loose at the knot is much lower. So that's a good thing. But just like the overhand slip knot, the double overhand slip knot will also come undone the same way. So let me tie that again, make a double loop, okay? Then form a bite with your standing end of your rope, push it through the hole or through that double loop, and then cinch it down, pulling your standing end, and then that cinches the rope, and now it will slip. Okay, so that is your double overhand knot. Okay, so now we're going to do what we call a square knot. Some people also call this a reef knot. Okay, but most people call it a square knot. And what I'm doing here, I'm going to move my rope up here where you can see the standing end better. Okay, so I'm taking this one and I'm going to, because they call it overhand, this is again kind of like tying the overhand knot, except this is a square knot. So but the first step is just like an overhand knot. So you're taking your running end, okay, and you're going over the standing end and going all the way around, okay? But rather than pulling it all the way through, I then take my running end, okay, and I go back over my standing end, okay, and then pull it tight. And notice it comes out into a really nice looking knot, okay? You have your loop going out one side, and then your running end coming, the little tail is coming out the other. But notice they're both in the same, on the same plane, all below the turn in the knot, okay, and the same way on the other side. Okay, so if we look, we flip that knot over, okay, it's the same on both sides, and that's why they call it a square knot. It has kind of that square shape to it. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate it again. Pull it loose and get this overhand knot out of it. So we're taking our running end, we go over the standing end, run it around there, okay, just like we would with an overhand knot. Then we take that running end and go back over the standing end, okay, and then under, and then pull tight. Okay, now I'm going to show you what happens if you tie this knot the wrong way, and you'll know if you tied it the wrong way. Okay, when you go over, okay, and under, okay, that's the first step. But if you forget and you go under instead of over on the back feed, okay, it's going to give you something that's crossed up. Okay, so that looks different. Okay, things are going, you got your loop that's over top of that, the loop part of the knot, and then your tail is going under. So they're on opposite sides of that loop there. Okay, you don't want that. You want everything to be on the same side. So that's a way of helping you to know that you've tied it the wrong way. So you go over, okay, now see how that rope is like that, over and under, and then going the opposite side, over and under, and then pull everything. So pull your loop and your standing end and your loop and your running end, and then cinch it down. Okay, and now you've created a square knot. Now a square knot usually has to be backed off, okay, or as far as do a backup with like a half hitch or something like that. So you just take that little tail there and just tie that down, and what that does is that secures the knot and keeps it from coming loose. Otherwise, a square knot tied with a rope that's this thick would that knot will come loose, okay, if you pull on it too much, unless you just get it really good and tight. But if I'm pulling both ends of it, if I put a load on this, the chances of it coming loose really go up. All right, so now we're going to do a figure 8 knot. Now, figure 8 knot is a common knot that's used for climbing and things like that. Tree work is another one that uses a figure 8 commonly. But figure 8, the way this one works is you're taking your running end and you can make a loop around a couple of fingers. That's what I usually do. I just use my fingers. Okay, or you can just take and just loop it over itself. Okay, but notice the orientation of the rope. It's over, the running end is over the standing end, and you're bringing that running end behind the standing end of the rope and pushing it through the hole. Okay, and this gives you an 8. Okay, so you see that, and you pull it tight, and you've got an 8, and that tells you that you tied the figure 8 properly. Now, what makes a figure 8 really cool is what you can do is with this is you can, if you tie it further up, say we're going to give ourselves a little bit more room here. So I'll make my loop around my fingers, going behind my standing end and pulling that through the hole just like that. So we tied a standard figure 8. I can retrace this loop or this knot, okay, which is going to give me a loop or a bite at the end. So if I retrace this, I'm basically following this rope along the same path that it took as we tied it. Okay, so I'm going around behind there. Okay, then I'm going behind in this little hole here behind everything. Let me pull that a little more so I got make sure I got plenty of rope. Okay, and I just keep following the pathway of my rope. Okay, so I'm going down in that hole and then up that hole. Okay, and when I've tied it correctly, okay, this is what it looks like. Okay, this is called a figure 8 on a bite. Okay, a bite being this part down here. Now I'm going to untie this. I'm going to show you another way to tie a figure 8 on a bite. If I untie this, all I have to do is pull that out just like that, and it comes loose. All right, so when we call it a figure 8 on a bite is where you're taking your running end of your rope and you're putting a turn in it, a bend. Okay, so you see the bend there. Okay, that's what we're looking for. And so you hold that in both hands. And then the concept is the same as doing the plain figure eight. You take the bite here, make a loop around your fingers, okay, keeping everything tight and up there. Okay, then you're bringing that bite around both the standing end and the running end. Okay, bring it around there, and then you're bringing it into the hole that you created to begin with. Okay, that loop, and then you tighten it down. Okay, and now we have a figure eight on a bite. Okay, notice that figure eight shape of the knot. Okay, this one's not dressed very well. Okay, you always want to dress your knots, okay, to help them look good. That helps them make sure that you know that it's tied correctly. And that's an important thing, because if these knots are not tied correctly, given that this kind of knot is used on lifelines for rappelling and rock climbing and rope climbing, if this were not tied correctly, it could slip loose and somebody could die. So it's important that you tie this knot correctly. And then usually what we do when we tie this type of knot, we come in and we put a backup knot, a safety knot, okay, in here, which is usually like a half hitch or something like that, or 2 half hitches. Tighten that down and come back and put another one in there. Okay, and that keeps that from coming loose. Okay, creates a stopper, so that's good and tight. Okay, and that keeps everything together, keeps it good and safe. All right. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you how to tie is actually not a knot necessarily, but it's actually called a hitch. Okay, this is something called a clove hitch. And a clove hitch is a steady way, a real sure way of securing a line and making sure that it won't come loose. Okay, there's a couple of ways to tie a clove hitch. So the first way is what we call an open clove hitch, and the reason they call it that is because it allows the tire to be able to slip this over something that has an open end. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate what that looks like here in a second. But to tie an open clove hitch, you make a loop. I call them bunny ears. Okay, so or it could be mouse ears even. So you make a loop. Okay, notice that the running end is underneath the standing end to form that loop. Then you're going to take your running end and you're going to make another loop. Okay, and so it looks like this. Okay, so everything is kind of opposite of each other. So one big mouse ear, one little mouse ear. One part of the loop is going over, and then on your second loop, it's going under. So then you take these two loops, you take the one on the right, and you pass it over the one on the left, okay? And then you pull everything tight, okay? But you leave everything open, okay? And then you can take your object with your open end, okay, and you can put that on there, and then cinch it down. Okay, and now you have just tied an open clove hitch. Okay, notice the pattern here, how the rope goes over top of your tail there, and then your standing end's coming out the other side. Okay, but this is an open clove hitch. So I'm going to demonstrate it one more time so you can see it again. Okay, so we're making a loop. Okay, and I'm tying this one more on the standing end, because you can tie this hitch on any part of the rope as long as you're making two loops. Okay, so I've got my first loop. Okay, my thumb is sitting over top of that. Okay, I make my second loop, which is kind of wanting to twist here. Gotta have an uncooperative rope here. So take my mouse ears. Okay, move the right one over the left one. Okay, cinch that down just a little bit with by pulling on both ends. Okay, and then I can place that around any open object, okay, to be able to secure it. Okay, so that is an open clove hitch. Okay. All right, so now we're going to tie a closed clove hitch. Okay, and we do this by taking our running end of the rope, we lay that over top of whatever it is that we're wanting to tie to, okay, and pull that all the way around. Then I'm taking that and I'm going over my standing end and back over whatever it is that I'm tying to. Okay, this creates a V. So this right here is the V. I then am going to take my running end here and I'm going to pull that through the V. Okay, so the V is what I'm using as my marker there. Okay, and then I pull the standing end and the running end, and now I've tied a closed clove hitch. Okay, and you can tie this the same way. I mean, you can also slide this over an open-ended object, such as what I have it tied to. Okay, but when you pull on this, it bites down on itself. Okay, so it doesn't slide loose easily. Okay, but if you wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to, and we would for safety purposes, we'd tie a half hitch in this thing so that it just won't slide loose. Okay, and that makes sure that the knot is secure. Okay, so watch again. We're going to do this. We're going to do this again. So we're going over, then over our rope. Okay, forms a V on the left side of where we went over, bringing the rope all the way around and back through the V. Okay, and then pulling it, and that gives us a closed clove hitch. Okay. We're going to tie a knot called a bowline knot. Now, a bowline knot is similar to a figure eight. It can be used as a lifeline. It can be used to tie rope to an object such as a tree, okay, and give you something that you can then run your rope from to tie other things, okay. Particularly something not like a trucker's hitch or something like that, which I'll demonstrate a little bit later. Okay, but to tie a bowline knot, okay, the best way to remember this is to think about a rabbit, a hole in a tree. Okay, so what we're going to do is we got our standing end is way up there. This is our running end down here. So we're taking our running end and we're making a loop. Okay, use 2 fingers. Okay, to make a loop. Okay, then our running end, the end here becomes, this is our rabbit. Okay, and a way to remember this is the rabbit comes out of the hole, okay, runs around the tree, and then runs back in the hole again. Okay, and when he's back in there, then you pull on the standing end of the rope, and now you have a bowline knot. Okay, let's do this again. So we're going to undo this here. We're making a loop. Okay, there's our nice little rabbit hole. Our rabbit here on the end comes out of the hole, runs around the tree, and goes back in the hole again. And then we pull on our standing end of the rope, and we've got a loop. Okay, you can tie this around a tree, you tie this around a person, just almost any kind of thing like that. Okay, this can also be used as a climbing knot. There's a couple different ways to tie this to use with climbing. It's not one of my favorite knots to use as a climbing knot, although the great thing about a bowline knot is it's much easier to untie after it has a load on it. So if we put a load on this, okay, if say you were using this as a safety knot and you were to slip and fall and all your weight pinched down on the knot, okay, you can still untie this knot after the fact. A figure eight you cannot do that with. If you were to apply a lot of weight real quickly to a figure eight knot, it draws extremely tight and it will not come loose. Okay, a bowline knot, on the other hand, will. But as long as this knot is cinched down and it's got weight on the end of it, it's not going to pull loose. Okay, it bites down on itself really well, and so it's a really strong knot. It's not one that's going to come loose very easily. Okay, so I'm going to tie this one more time, so because this one's a little complicated. Okay, so we make our loop. Okay, we're taking our running end, going out of the hole. Our rabbit, he's going out of the hole, around the tree, and back in the hole again. And then we pull our standing in, and now we've got this beautiful little bowline knot. And you can tell, you know, this one when you see this very distinct design here. And it's the name bowline. It actually, if you were to pronounce it as it looks like bowline, B-O-W-L-I-N-E, but it's pronounced bowline knot, like you're going bowling, only without the G on the end. Bowline knot. Okay, that's the way sailors would pronounce it, because it's also used as a sailing knot as well. All right, the next knot we're going to learn how to tie is a knot that's designed to join two pieces of rope together that are a different diameter. Okay, this is called a sheet bend. Okay, the way we tie a sheet bend is we put a bend in the running end of one end of the rope. Okay, so just like so. Okay, then we take our smaller diameter rope, it's right here, the red piece. Okay, and we feed that into that bend. Now, what it helps to do is to grab the one end of the rope and pinch that with the other one, so it forms a bite. Okay, then we take our red rope, our small diameter rope, and we go around the upper portion of the bend. Okay, it goes around the top, around the bottom, and then it comes back up and you push it underneath, okay, your smaller rope, like so. Okay, and then pull tight. Okay, and so when you secure it down, that locks in place. You pull on both ends, and that is secure. Now, the great thing about a sheet bend is when this does not have a load on it, it will come loose. Okay, it's easy to break loose. All you have to do is pull like that, and it comes apart. Okay, simple as that. All right, I'm gonna show it to you again. So make a bend in the rope, take your smaller diameter rope, run it through the bend, okay, and around, okay, both sides or both portions of that bend. So you're basically wrapping it around the bend. Okay, then you pull the tail through or underneath the standing portion of the small diameter rope and pull tight. And then that cinches down on the larger diameter rope, and then you can work with that. Okay, so you can pull on both ends. As long as it's got tension on it, it's not going to slip loose. It's a very secure knot. Okay, if you wanted to, you could always go back and tie half hitches to each end, okay, to help secure it and tighten it down. Okay, but it's really not necessary to do with this particular knot. But that's what it would look like if you put the half hitches in. Okay, so again, that's not a necessary step when you're doing this. This is important if you have a rope that's too short and is not going to be sufficiently long enough to be able to do what you need it to do, so you can join two ropes together and be able to still accomplish whatever task it is that you've set out to do. Okay, so that's a sheet bend. All right, so now we're going to tie what's called a trucker's hitch. And so this might be a little bit difficult to visualize. Okay, I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got. So in order to tie a trucker's hitch, this rope is designed, or this type of hitch is designed to be able to pull the rope taut without having to do a whole lot and still be able to make it secure. So the best way to do a trucker's hitch is to do an overhand slip knot. Okay, so remember we put our loop in our rope, and then take the standing end, which is what I've got attached to something else over here, and push that up into that knot, okay, and tighten it down. Okay, so there is our slip knot, overhand slip knot. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the other end of my rope. I'm going to leave that knot there. So I'm taking the other end of my rope and I'm wrapping it around an object. Okay, and so then I'm going to come out here to my knot there, my slip knot, and I'm going to put the running end of my rope through that loop. Okay, and what this is going to do, this is going to create tension. So as I pull this, it creates almost like a pulley system, and I can start pulling on this. Notice that knot tightens down, okay, but it will slip, and I can pull this tight, okay, until I have tension in my rope. Okay, so that's pretty tight. Now what I can do once I've done that, okay, in order to tie this off, okay, I then can pinch this closed, okay, and I can tie what's known as I'm just taking basically a bite, wrapping it around, and tying a half hitch into it, or a couple of half hitches. Okay, but I pinch it to make sure it doesn't slip. Okay, and then take this and just make a bite there and pull through, and then cinch it down. Okay, and this will keep this from coming undone. But this way, this line is tight. Now this is an important one to know how to do, just for the simple fact is it's a great utility hitch to be able to put up, like say a tarp or something like that, if you were stuck out in the woods and need to build a shelter real quick and had everything else that you needed. But basically all I have to do is pull that loose, take that apart like that, and then this will come loose just like that. I can pull it loose and then pop my overhand knot out. Okay, so I'm going to show it to you again. Make our loop, make our overhand slip knot. Okay, so there it is. And then I'm coming back to the thing that I'm wanting to attach this to. Come back, put my line through that loop, and then pull. Okay, see the knot cinches down right here. Okay, and then all I have to do is just pull it until it's tight. Okay, and I grab this. Okay, I wrap around it one time, okay, to form a little loop there. Take a bite, push down into that hole there, and cinch it down. Well, I missed my knot. Okay, that's what happens when you don't cinch it down or don't hold it the right way. Okay. Okay, you gotta get it cinched down behind the knot, or else it'll slip through there. So there, that's secure. So we're going to use this knot, this system. We're actually going to practice putting up a tarp using this technique. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to show this to you. But that's a trucker's hitch. The trucker's hitch, the main parts of it are the overhand knot, the overhand slip knot, okay, which we tie right there. Okay, and then taking our running end, putting it through the loop, and then cinching it down. So you're basically pulling that, creating this little pulley system using that knot, and this is what helps to tighten it down. Okay, so that's our trucker's hitch. All right, guys, so now you have 8 knots. That's what I've given you, is 8 knots that you can now work to try to figure out how to tie on your own. The reason I did it the way I did it was because I wanted you to be able to see kind of a bird's eye view or a looking down view on the knot. Because when you can see kind of what I'm seeing as I tie it, hopefully that will help you be able to visualize it yourself as you practice tying these knots. Knot tying is something that takes a lot of practice to get right every time. Okay, the more you do it, the better at it that you get. So what I generally tell people is what you want to be able to do is to be able to tie a knot. Okay, be able to tie these knots either blindfolded or with one hand or both. If you can tie these knots blindfolded or with your hands behind your back, or in the dark, or with one hand, then that shows that you have mastered these knots. Okay, and every one of these is possible to tie one-handed. So once you learn the basic concept of it, keep practicing. You can use any length of rope. You preferably one that's about 3 feet long, and you can practice with that every single one of these knots. So that's what I encourage you to do. So the next video I'll take you out and we'll show you some of the practical uses of these different knots.